sort of opener to a conversation with you about what you're seeing and some of what we should know about, or some of what others in the room should know about. In terms of that challenge that I think Robert talked about, so many people, so many CEOs being dissatisfied with what they've done or tried in terms of corporate innovation and the search for growth in their companies. So bear with me here. I put this together just for you guys. I want to start out with the depressing stuff, which I know everybody in this room has seen, which is patience really requires a challenge. Patience is still a big challenge for large organizations, and we see a lot of what we call the sudden death of innovation programs. The Coca-Cola Founders Program, where they were trying to connect entrepreneurs who wanted to work on ideas that were relevant to Coca-Cola and set up shop in San Francisco, had a 3-year lifespan. It was Alaska Airlines customer innovation team that was going into frequent flyer lounges, doing really interesting lean startup prototypes and tests. Just shut down in 2015. The Society of Grown-Ups, which was an initiative that started here in Boston by MassMutual, they had plans to roll it out to other cities. It was about financial literacy and education for 20-somethings and 30-somethings, abruptly shut down in 2016. So there are always these dynamics that can sort of end even these very well-intentioned innovation initiatives. And so we've been compiling a list that we call things that kill innovation initiatives. And part of it is really depressing because some of it's out of our control. Even the best advice, the best guidance, the best tools, having the best people as part of your innovation lab or your innovation team can't really help you if the executive champion leads the organization. The big story here in Boston over the last year or so has been GE moving its headquarters from Connecticut to Boston to plug into the innovation and startup scene here. And then just last month, you see the CEO is kind of nudged out the door by activist investors who feel like GE's stock price hasn't, even though they've been saying the word innovation and doing a lot of the right things around open innovation, crowdsourcing ideas, didn't affect the stock price, and you lose the CEO. And I think it's kind of an open question of how much the innovation religion in GE is going to endure under the next guy. One of the reasons that we're here at Fidelity and kind of we have tried to bring people here as often as possible is that the lifespan of Fidelity Labs in its various incarnations is now
20.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah, 20.
18 years? Yeah, 27 he says. So this consistency is somewhat important. I think it's an open question, Chris, about should there be new talent or new thinking or pivoting? Someone at our last event in DC came up with this metaphor of big organizations being like aircraft carriers, and the innovation team is the tugboat that's trying to pull the aircraft carrier in a different direction. And once you get it moving in a different direction, you kind of need a new mission. There's no tugboats that's pulling the aircraft carrier from Boston to Liverpool or whatever. And so there can be that need every 3 or 4 years to kind of reconstitute and find a new mission.
Doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah. One of the things though that we see a fair amount though is that second point of the team just trying to do too much at once. They think they're a product development team, they're also a training team, they're also running an innovation awards program, and just that the 2-3 person team that's trying to do way too much with very few resources. The full list that we've compiled of things that we see that often kill innovation initiatives is at that URL. And I'll share the slide presentation so that you don't have to take notes. Some of what we're seeing with things that people call innovation labs is that often they're set up initially as a showcase or a place to put all the cool furniture or paint the walls funky colors or with whiteboard paint. And nobody quite knows really how to activate the space. It's just we want to build a cool space for our 3-person innovation team. And then they realize that there's not enough happening in it. We really see this shift where they're becoming collaborative workspaces and places you can bring clients in to co-create, places where you actually do legitimately have employees from the company who might be coming in on a 1-week rotation or a 1-month rotation. So really thinking less about a showcase where you're touring people through and more about a workplace where there's something happening on a daily basis. I think in traditional R&D labs, this is something that we're really still trying to understand, but at many companies, the traditional R&D organization might be the 500 PhDs in a room. They're attracting super smart people who want to work in that industry, but it's a fairly insular part of the organization. It's the kind of leave us alone. We have the 10-year plan of where the company needs to go, and we'll produce the quarterly report on what that vision is. And often they're not seeing what may be happening in the startup ecosystem. There's not a whole lot of open innovation practices. It's kind of a pretty impermeable organization that we think needs to get more permeable. Somebody who had run Disney research, Joe Mark, said to me that the smartest group to be hosting startups or running an accelerator program would be the R&D organization. Just to get that sort of creative ferment of 20-somethings who have kind of a great new idea, but kind of don't really know how to interact with a big company or what the big company needs might be. I'm curious, some of you who work kind of more in the R&D space, does this resonate some of with what you see? And certainly the need for different methodologies, particularly things like in startup where you might have some earlier interactions with customers rather than, hey, there's this project that's been cooking R&D for 5 years, and $20 million, let's finally show it to a customer. I think on metrics, commonly what we see is that programs in their first year or two are capturing a lot of activity metrics, sort of how busy are we, how many ideas are we collecting, how many training sessions have we run, and if you want to survive that 2 or 3 year kind of danger zone in your lifespan, you need to move pretty quickly to getting the business metrics that other people in the company actually care about, like increasing market share, reaching customer segments that the company didn't used to reach, improving store traffic in underperforming stores, things that people in the business units watch as metrics, and they certainly are not watching, a number of Post-it notes put on the wall during a brainstorming session. And so there can be a lot of activity around collecting these metrics that don't matter to anybody outside of the innovation team. This chart, we asked people about the governance body in your corporation that oversees innovation, whether it's 1 executive, 3 executives, or in some cases a committee of 8 or 10 or 12 executives. What are the metrics that they care about most when you report into them? And you can see that the financial stuff like revenue potential, total market size, far outstrips any other metric. Early customer revenue or number of pilots run is not far behind it. And then other stuff, the other category has some interesting answers like the impact on cost. Lots of metrics are important to us. Or internal adoption, because sometimes you're developing an idea that's for the call center people to use or the distribution center people to use, and so did that actually get embraced by your employees is a pretty interesting metric.
Scott, how large is that?
This sample size is about 55 respondents at 10 billion revenue amount of companies. A lot of what we see in this kind of working with startups world, and I'm interested to talk more with those of you who are thinking about the big company startup connection, is kind of like the kissing babies, shaking hands thing of imagining that innovation is going to happen because you go to an accelerator for the afternoon, or even because you put one of your employees in a co-working space and they're hanging around lots of startups. And I think there are lots of entities in the startup world, we run into them, that would love to sell corporates the $250,000 a year membership that lets all of your employees come and hang out with the startups, but often it just doesn't have any clarity of vision or purpose. And so where we see companies are going is really focusing in on here are 3 themes that we're trying to think about. For Fidelity it might be blockchain, and let's make sure we know all the interesting blockchain startups around the world, not just the ones that are in Boston or New York or geographies that Fidelity employees are in, but really looking at it globally, and also creating a real structure for how are we going to interact with these startups. We may decide we don't want seed stage, 2 women in a garage startups, but we want to make sure they're at their B round of funding and they have a product that we can buy. Or maybe we do want to be the first customer for the 2 women in a garage startup, and we're willing to try stuff at the bleeding edge. But kind of designing a process for here's who we want to work with, and here's how a pilot is going to work. If you get a group of startup people in a room, they will tell you that most of the time they'll have one big company interaction that will be 15 meetings and no revenue, and it can be very frustrating. So part of this figuring out a way to deal with startups is really, what is your simple 2-page agreement that is, here's how a pilot works, and maybe here's some money on the table for you to, pay for your ramen noodles and pay for your co-working space bills, and let's make sure that this is something that's going to work for both of us, not just waste the startup's time.
It's also just worth noting, sorry to interrupt, this is also a place where we actually see companies moving along the maturity curve like really fast. So companies that have already spent the last 5 years with a Techstars or something, or a Rocket Space, and realize it's not working and are trying to figure out what phase B is. So companies, we see a lot of companies moving quickly along this path.
And the other thing I mentioned, which it kind of came up tangentially in our tour of Fidelity Labs yesterday, is over time, the companies that are really interested in interacting with startups and have a way to work with them and not waste their time just become magnets for the best startups in their industry. And I think Fidelity, not to suck up, but Fidelity, by having had that strategy over the last 5 or 10 years, is really doing it in financial services. And I think a lot of companies think that all the best startups are going to knock on their door or bust down the door wanting to work with them, and it just isn't the way the startup ecosystem works. Often the best startups don't have any strategy, don't want to have anything to do with big companies. They sort of want to go it alone. Airbnb did not need a partnership with Marriott or Hyatt to become successful, right? So I think that there really isn't, it's incumbent upon the big companies to become that startup magnet in their industry. We see a lot of companies, initially this is something I was kind of skeptical of, is creating the network of champions or innovation catalysts in their company. And to me, it felt initially like you're becoming an arm of HR, and I'm not really sure what running this champions program gets you. But back to the slide of innovation programs dying, many times they die just because not enough people in the organization know that they exist or have seen their impact in some way. And so where I've come to on this Champion Catalyst Network thing is that having 50 people that you have interacted with in some way, that come through the innovation space and spent a month there or spent a week there and learned some new skills, and you send them back to Singapore or you send them back to Tokyo, can be really high impact for these innovation programs, even if the strategy may shift over time, even if you may only see them in person once a year, and maybe you have a monthly conference call or webcast. Vodafone and Pfizer and Merck are all doing this. Fidelity has been doing this. Stephanie Simon, who you weren't here for the introduction, but I'm introducing you now, has been designing the Innovation Champions program at Fidelity. And do you disagree with any of this, or are you seeing some of the impacts?
I just love your broader view, because we're utilizing the champions a lot on the front of facilitators and trainers, and then we have ambassadors for different club events that we host. But I like the broader view you have of how this role is evolving, because every company's going after this for different reasons. The Dare to Try program, I'm familiar with at Pfizer, and they have a certain target around it. Intuit, I think, has them. So yeah, I've learned about them in different forms, and I like to see your summary around that.
Yeah, I'll chime in as well and validate this. We see it expanded a lot, and we actually work with Pfizer and their Dare to Try programs. One of the things that I think we're seeing is an evolution, right? So you have to start with a core group. It has to be centralized to begin with. It can't start as a distributed model. So, but the maturity is, you don't just get bigger and bigger at the central location. You push out the champion network. You create those pockets of knowledge to help the innovation program succeed in that way.
Yeah. Let me hand around the mic so everybody can hear.
We do have a microphone here as well.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be a little bit easier
Why don't you
to
use that
travel
one first? Yeah, and then we'll go to the toss mic.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is it's not just the knowledge, it's the common language. And that if you have this network out there that's all speaking the same language, they all understand what the definition of innovation is to them in the same way, they're using the same language, they're using the same techniques, it's easier for the virus to spread.
I forgot we have the throwable microphone. Should we start using this one?
Okay, it's just a short point to add that from our perspective, I think we would say that this is all about people and getting everybody in the same mindset. And so having other people in the organisation who are sort of enthusiastic and can go around and drive that is just critical to encouraging and driving adoption.
Yeah. Can you toss it back to me?
I could just talk loud.
It's also really important that these people have clout in the organization.
Yeah.
You don't want just the process police. If they get the process police reputation, you're dead.
Yeah. Have to be able to do
And
that.
one thing that Doug got me thinking about is in the Vodafone example, they're actually like salespeople that are often being trained to be the innovation catalyst, and they're in front of customers. They're kind of being trained to innovate with customers and listen to customers in different ways versus just, here's our catalog and what services do you want to buy from us. Some other people want to
Just on the counter to this is that we were in New York visiting with one of the biggest consulting firms in the world, and they kind of said that this is baloney, that this is not working, that they've seen companies that are doing this. Those go back into the business units and they kind of peter and die. So they just, something to think about is.
But they may peter and die. They may peter and die because there's no support.
Yeah.
I mean, the
There's
initial
something
training
bigger,
is
something bigger going on.
nothing if there's no support.
Yeah.
So I have the sense,
You want it?
I see. I have the sense that it's not so much what these teams need, it's also what these organizations can do without. What things can you take out of the process? The high expectations, the planning for the revenue, many inhibitors, I was speaking with you earlier, using the word inhibitors. That's what we seems to be missing. It's not about energy and mentorship and guiding. Take stuff out of this organization or this group.
Yeah.
So you're saying kind of think about innovation as simplicity, streamlining. You can simplify processes, or am I getting that wrong?
Simplified processes, not just simplified processes that ought to be simple. People are naturally creative, naturally innovative. Get all the frictional pieces out of the system,
Yeah.
and then it moves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who can I throw this to?
Let's keep moving rather than hover on this point too long, because I want to just kind of share a couple other topics. The business unit relationship issue is really a huge one for innovation teams to figure out. And often, you may have seen this, they start off thinking, we're just going to be this insular group of cool kids with a cool office space. The business units don't know about the future. They're so focused on the next quarter. And then they realize, oh, we actually are going to need these business units when we have an idea that needs to get to customers or needs some kind of production support or distribution. This was a survey that we did earlier this year. This is about 200 respondents, and only 30% saying, no, we have our own budget that the business units aren't involved with in any way. We have a budget that comes from corporate that we control, or 24% saying, yes, the majority of funds come from a business unit. And we think that funding often is tied to, where does your agenda come from? Who is sort of telling you what to work on? Are these ideas that you have to have vetted or approved or maybe come from the business unit? Or are these ideas that you can just sort of say, hey, we know there's a customer out here that our company doesn't think about today, and we can pursue them. But you can see the majority say it's kind of a mix. Some from corporate that maybe lets you consistently think, about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 stuff, and maybe some of it from the business unit where they say, hey, we know there's white space in the product mix, and we'd love for you to help fill that innovation team. And then another slide on the business unit relationships, just with some data. How would you describe the effectiveness of a handoff from the innovation or R&D group to the business units? We didn't think anybody, this is probably bad survey design, we didn't think anybody was going to say perfect, could not be improved in any possible way, so we didn't offer that as an option. But the best option is that 48% good but could be improved, 26% saying not good, needs serious work, 16% saying that multiple projects have withered post handoff, and then just 2% saying we as an innovation team are somehow going to get stuff to the market or to customers ourselves, and we don't need those stinking business units. Comments on this or questions? Yeah, Bob.
Kind of what occurs to me is that it's almost there's an assumption built into this that there should be a handoff, and I think that's part of the problem. I think that you've got to have some of the same folks who are in the early formative stages and the folks that are bringing across the finish line, hand in hand together through the whole process. And I think in terms of the handoff, I think that folks that are chosen to do this work should be screened, like you screened for friendliness. They should be screened for, I have a mission, it's associated with the business unit. On the one hand, I have a mission, it's associated with corporate innovation goals, and we get it, and we're going to work together to help each other achieve those goals and bring across the finish line.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we did get one comment, I think it was from somebody in the healthcare industry who said, you know, this idea that you're going to throw something over the wall and the business unit is going to adopt it is just really flawed, and that you do need to have that involvement early on and that rotation of business unit people coming to the innovation team, innovation people going out maybe to help with the deployment rather than the toss it over the wall. The most recent research we did was around governance and reporting and communications for these innovation groups. You know, what we found is that many people get probably given this innovation committee, you know, of everybody in the organization who felt like innovation was important, and there are 12 of them, and they represent every function and every business unit, and that becomes the innovation committee. Only a couple companies, I think, that we've run into, like ExxonMobil is one example, that have been successful in actually paring down that committee and saying, like, you don't want that many people. That becomes we call the supersized committee of no. You know, there's always enough people there that can red light things and put the kibosh. This reporting chart here talks about different executives, the likelihood that they are overseeing or sort of involved in innovation. It is a good thing, I think, that you see 30% saying the CEO is someone that I report to. Surprisingly, 40% of these groups are reporting to a business unit, or maybe they're part of that business unit as an innovation or R&D or futures group. And luckily, only 16% reporting to the CFO. Yeah, can we toss around the mic?
I think this is another place we have to distinguish between Horizon 1 and Horizon 2, 3, because the metrics are different in the two categories. The makeup of the team, their role is different. It's more about nurturing and learning metrics in the Horizon 2, 3 space, where Horizon 1, you're using your typical financial metrics and predetermined phase gate criteria. So you really have to again, think of it as a dual system, even in the governance.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let me just move on before we run short on time here, because I want to touch on two last topics. The culture change, you'll see in a second, is really surprisingly, it's one of these things that I think companies will say, we know that our culture isn't working, and it's such a squishy thing to try to have any impact on. And again, this is something when we were starting Innovation Leader, I felt like, I'm not sure this is something we can deal with, or that you can be helpful on, or you can move the needle on. I think I'm coming around on this just because you see such a talent difference in companies that have horrible cultures and no open innovation competitions, or no hackathons, or no workspace that feels non-cubically and non-fluorescent lit. There are a lot of companies we see are just losing the talent war because their culture is so anti-innovation and so closed and so hierarchical that we feel like this is something that companies have to be working on. And there are lots of ways you can do this. One of the things that we just did recently was just kind of the culture, collecting survey questions that big companies use to know, is the culture going in the right direction, because we've had the coding triathlon that Dan was talking about, or we've had a hackathon, or is it really not having an impact? And the importance of kind of doing that annual survey. Yeah, Langdon.
Just a question, does this explain why the turnover in chief innovation officers is so high?
Because they focus too much on culture?
No, because they break their pick on trying to change the culture and they give up.
Yeah, maybe. And because these teams are 3 people and the company's 50,000 people in 50 locations, and maybe this is not the first thing that you work on. One of our hypotheses is that there really is kind of a key decision point in the first or second year of these programs, where it's like, are we going to be about people and culture, or are we going to be about product development, service development, cost cutting, actually developing concrete projects in this lab? And we can talk about this later today, like, can you really do a mix of those things, particularly in the early years of a program, or are you really at risk if you're just seen as the people and culture team? So this is just some of the last data that I wanted to show you, which is kind of an ongoing survey, 184 responses that we've had so far, about like, what are the things you guys are interested in? And again, I'm happy to share this because it may be useful to you. The top issue, surprisingly, is spotting emerging technologies, but the second thing is spurring cultural change and being more open to risk. And then you can, CDAP plus co-creation with customers, training employees or running workshops, innovation to reduce costs, there are a bunch of other issues that we asked about that kind of fell below the 20% threshold, but these are kind of the top 15 or so things that our corporate members are thinking about. And you can see a lot of our research has been driven by this survey. When people tell us that they're thinking about the lean startup methodology, we went and did a research report last year on how do big companies pursue the lean startup methodology.
Do you do that on a rolling basis, like every year?
We don't really refield it. Right now it's kind of an open survey that new members are invited to fill out once they join. And this will be more useful, I think, when I share the slide presentation afterwards, but just some comments that are the open-ended things about what are you thinking about or what issues are you dealing with. While Scott Cohen was saying, we're seeing a lot of people leave these roles at big companies, you're constantly seeing new programs get started and people get hired who are really the first head of innovation in their company, particularly in manufacturing and financial services and healthcare. And they are thinking about a lot of the basics, the end-to-end innovation funnel, customer journey mapping, entrepreneurship, these things that maybe some of us feel like are things that you should have been working on 5 years ago, or you should have been talking about customer experience 5 years ago, but these companies are just now trying to learn about it. So I think all of you can be helpful. I love the last one. Just making innovation part of people's day jobs, not making it a special thing that happens in the innovation lab, I think is really important. So I'd love to hear if there are anything that we touched on that you disagree with, or that you underscore different challenges that you're seeing. We can spend a couple minutes talking about that.
So I just had a comment related to one of the first slides that we discussed around the key challenge with having a CEO or a leader of innovation leading the company. I think I see that as a challenge certainly, but I think more so it presents an opportunity. If you develop the right relationships with these leaders, them spreading their wings and going to another place where they're going to have their mark and impact on the world, and being a part of that partnership with them and maintaining the relationship despite them moving on from one company or another, I think can present more opportunity than anything else.
Great point.
Maybe my vision is poor, but in the last two slides were the things that people are interested in. I didn't really see the language around delight the customer, bring brand new things to the customer. There are a lot of words innovation, which I don't know. That's really a business. No one's saying innovate for me. There are business-related goals and metrics and stuff there, which all businesses forever have tried to do to make themselves bigger and greater. If you use that kind of language, you're always going to be putting everything in the context of what's in it for us. And I think, to me, language means a lot. The words you use means a lot. And it's all about, we have to shift our language and our focus to customer, some improvement of their goals, improvement of their lives. If you do that, then a lot of things follow. Your metrics are different. The questions you ask on this survey are different. It shifts the mind shift. There's a mind shift.
Yeah, I think that's really great because we are definitely approaching it as methodologies and issues. That should probably be on the list. And we talk about co-creating with customers, which is a little bit about that openness. Let's understand what they care about, but I like the language you use.
I just wanted to chime in and say my suggestion was that every corporation should start with Y, Simon's next Y, and that speaks immediately to that. We're not saying any of that there. So.
Yeah. And it's funny, just back to the lean startup, there's so much interest in the last year or two of lean startup, and I think I was talking with Clay about this last night, and then when it comes to we need to talk to customers and show them a paper prototype of something, that's where lean startup kind of hits the brick wall, and it's like, oh wait, we have all these groups in the company that are in charge of understanding the customer, and they want to often be the, the gatekeeper to that.
Looking at the metrics question and the comment on the previous about making innovation everybody's job, I'm curious how individuals as opposed to divisions are rewarded for innovation.
I think that we're seeing a lot of companies where they want it to be part of the annual performance review. They want there to be some performance metrics that's like, how many things did you test this year? How many new ideas did you roll out in your division, whether you're in IT or whether you're in a more customer-facing business unit? But I don't think we're seeing enough concrete examples of how that happens.
Yeah, I'll just give an example. Last year, working with the CEO, we actually did do that. He said, come together and come up with things, and we actually used 3 criteria and changed all the performance reviews for the whole company around know me, surprise me, and make it easy. And within those, we did talk about innovation or consumer experience, but all of ours as executives, all of our bonuses, all the way down to people in our call centers, that's what our essential programs, bonus programs, were all based on performance plans, everything, just those 3 simple things.
Thanks. Is there one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have some examples too. We do that a lot with customers, and I think we do it in a number of ways. Some, yes, based in their performance. Sometimes having stuff all at the end of the year, that type of thing is really important. But I think the language that we use with customers a lot is about value behavior and making sure that we're instilling that within organizations. It's not just about day job, keeping the lights on. Just to give a particular example, we work with a few law firms, and obviously their value behavior is building every 6 minutes, not contributing to driving the business forward in a different way other than just that building. So trying to get that mind shift internally throughout all the layers of the business, so at the leadership level you're showing that it is a value behavior is really important. And also, I think there are different archetypes of people within your organisation. It's not just about creation, it's about contributing and working together as well. Because you always have those who are willing to put ideas forward, but